Hey everybody, it's Britt Benner and welcome back to another episode of Behind the Stack, where today I'm thrilled to be sitting down with writer Alejandro Varela for his brand new book, Middle Spoon. A little bit about Alejandro. His work has appeared in the Boston, Yale, and Georgia Reviews, the Point Magazine, Harper's, and the Offing, among other publications. His debut novel, The Town of Babylon, was a finalist for the National Book Award. His short story collection, The People Who Report More Stress, was a finalist for the International Latino Book Awards and longlisted for the Aspen Literary Prize, the Story Prize, and the Gene Stein Awards. Varela is an editor-at-large of Apogee Journal and holds a master's degree in public health from the University of Washington and lives in New York. So, please enjoy this episode of Behind the Stack. Hey everybody, I'm really happy to have sitting down with me today Alejandro Varela for his brand new wonderful book, Middle Spoon, which I'm going to have him hold up so you could actually see the color version. There we go. And it's beautiful pink and red. It is such a fantastic, funny, thought-provoking book. So congratulations and thank you for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brett, for having me. This is wonderful.
Because we've never met before and I had read your first two books and loved them both so much. And I have to also admit, I've said this before, I'm not a huge short story person, but yours are so good. So anyway, that's just a side note. But I was so interested in your background because when I started to look at where you came from or how you started or all of this, I'm so curious because you got your bachelor's from Cornell and then you got a master's in public health at the University of Washington. Then moving ahead a little bit, you taught graduate level public health policy and advocacy at Long Island University before beginning to write. Now, when did the writing come in? Like, had you had in the back of your head, God, I'd really like to do this, or when did it start for you?
Well, if you ask my mother, she'll say that I always wanted to be a writer. I was really into film and television, and would always throwing out ideas for plays and things that I could do with my friends. I don't remember feeling that maybe there was a passion. It wasn't. I went to college with the intention of being an actor, and that was my secret intention. A second generation immigrant was not going to get his parents excited about being an actor. Although my parents were very supportive of anything I wanted to do, I went to Cornell pre-med, and then secretly I was going to take acting classes and then find my way. And I always thought I want to be an actor who writes his own stuff and who directs. I want to do all of it, and I have horrible stage fright. It was worse then than it is now, but after a couple of classes, I just realized I couldn't get over it. And it was decreasing the quality of my life, and I said, let me be realistic. Let me be a lawyer. So I studied government in college, and then I always had ideas for screenplays, and I had to have a drawer full of post-it notes with this is the story, this is I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and I watched a lot of film. And I was with a friend once who is a film director in France, and he said, "Well, why don't you tell me what the first scene is?" And I said, "Like right now, we're walking down the street for the movie I wanted to make." And I told him, and then he said, "Okay, go home right now. Write it down right now, Alejandro." So I kind of ran home and I took his advice and I wrote it down, but I didn't know how to format it as a screenplay. So I just wrote it, sort of freehand as prose. And before I knew it, I had a short story that I thought at any moment I'm going to make a screenplay, but it ended up being a short story, and I published that in a small journal, a literary journal. And then I kind of took off from there. And I thought, oh, stories, huh? I hadn't thought about it that way. And that was in 2012, 2013. And I was writing about 4 or 5 stories a year, maybe 6. And the rest is history. But they were always public health themed.
Wow.
So I would be in my public health world, and either because the narrators are all public health researchers or professors, or because someone in their life is affiliated with public health. But it was a way for me to talk about the things that interested me while writing and entertaining with the prose.
Writing what you know.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you had this unbearable stage fright and that you were going to transition into into law, which I guess my whole first, concept of lawyers are standing up there. It's its own theatrical venue. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
I guess you could have been the person who just writes the briefs and sits quietly in the background, and
yeah.
that's so funny. Um, so I read this great interview with you and Nicole Chung back in 2022 from The Atlantic, where you were talking a lot about your anxiety and anxiety in terms of promotion of a book or going out and getting in front of people. And now you're here with your third book about to launch. And how are you feeling? How does this feel in comparison now after a while? Now that you've been
Um,
around the rodeo a few times.
right. It's it gets easier for me, and I'll as a proof is I have had two interviews in the last week, and I didn't take a beta blocker for either. And in the
Wow.
past, I would have taken half a beta blocker even for an interview like this one that's not live, where I could say, "Oh, I'm nervous, give me a minute."
Yeah.
But I was so afraid of my sort of mouth drying up and stuttering and sweating and just not being able to focus that I would have taken a half a beta blocker. But I'm doing this completely without the help of the pharmaceutical industry, and um, and it feels great. I'm not nervous at all. So in that way, things have gotten better. Am I looking forward to being on a stage? Not always. I still get a little bit anxious about that. Um, but it's true that with each experience, it becomes easier and easier and easier.
I had a friend who's an actor who once said for actors who get nervous, if you can focus on the fact that the feeling that you feel in your stomach of uh, nerves is also many times the same feeling you have when you're excited.
Hmm.
And to be able to draw the parallel and turn it around. And of course, a lot of that's easier said than done. I'm someone who gets, every time I do one of these, I get incredibly nervous right before the guest comes on.
Mm.
I always and it's for many of the same reasons. I'm afraid I'm going to go up. I'm afraid I'm going to have dry mouth. I'm afraid I'm going to say something stupid. It's funny. I work with actors all the time, and I don't think about it at all. But I have this special reverence for writers in a different way, and because I equate some weird part of my head with writing with intelligence. And so because of what you all can do with words and the way that you can provoke thought and feeling and all the things, I think it's like a magic trick to me.
That
So
resonates with me too, just so you know, and especially not having come from a background in in writing and literature. I'm often surrounded by people who have PhDs in literature or English, and or at least their MFAs, and I think, oh my gosh, these people really prepared for this endeavor, and I'm sort of sneaking in. So I had to get over that. That's also getting easier with each book. Yeah.
I thought about it a lot because I've watched when the Booker judges were announced, and Sarah Jessica Parker was a Booker judge, and a lot of the online chatter was about her and like how can she be in this group, and yet I really felt like, well, she is someone who absolutely adores literature. She has an imprint. She is all about the writer. So I actually thought it was interesting, but I thought, and I saw an interview with her where she was talking about it too. And she said, similar to what you just said, she said, look, I am the one person here who is not, this is not my profession in terms of writing. She said, I'm just coming at this from a whole different angle, which I actually really appreciated.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
I also saw she chose a book from her imprint, or one of the
yes,
books
she
from
is.
her imprint got chosen.
Yes. Yes.
Get
Yes.
it, Carrie. You get it,
She's
Carrie.
not stupid, and just like that. Um, so, all right, I want to read something before I have you kind of give a elevator pitch for the book. This is from a short story that you wrote in 2023, but I read this the other night and I was like, this is so interesting because I think it speaks in some ways to what your current book is about. But this is from Grand Openings. And so here's the quote: some observations about pleasure and monotony. They're powerful. They will make one do things they promised they would never do, and they will accelerate a train already in motion. At times, they work in conjunction. Sometimes they're free agents. Pleasure will disrupt monotony, sure, but only momentarily. And the efforts to maintain that disruption will, in most cases, lead to irreversible effects. Life continues until it doesn't. I read that and I thought so much of these characters in this book. And with that, I would love for you to just, if you could, give an elevator pitch, if you have one, I'm sure you do, for Middle Spoon.
So, Middle Spoon is it's a love story, I think, at its heart, but it's a complicated love story, maybe a post-revolutionary or postmodern love story about a seemingly happy or content man who's married and has children and a job and owns his home and is living the life maybe many others would seek. And he is dealing with tremendous and really first time heartbreak. He's been dumped by his boyfriend of the last year. And he is processing that grief and that pain and trying to get through it while also maybe dealing with the guilt of already having a perfect life. So how can he have this pain? And in addition to that, while just trying to be a parent and a husband and a son and a productive member of society, at its heart, I believe Middle Spoon to be a love story, just a messy one.
uh, it's an epistolatory novel, which I found fascinating. What made you decide to put it in this format?
I didn't think there are two places in the world where I thought someone could be as free, as unburdened to be as vulnerable as the narrator is. And they are in a therapy session and even more so in a journal. But the
Mm,
modern day journal, or in this case, would be the drafts folder of of his email. And also because he's fighting the urge to communicate with someone. They've broken up. He wants to be in touch with this person. And the drafts, the letters allowed the writer to give a lot of backstory and to retell the story of that relationship in a way that didn't actually require Ben, the guy who's left him, to be
mm,
an active character. So he's there, but he's a passive character in a lot of ways.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
and so the narrator is able to retell what happened, what went wrong, what he would have done, what he could have done, how he saw the events of their relationship or the timeline, while also processing a lot of his other anxieties and concerns in his life, which he's constantly juggling. I couldn't imagine having those sorts of vulnerable, honest moments or writing in dialogue or in a
Mm,
traditional narrative. I think the desperation and the feelings needed to be communicated in this way to the person that had caused them. And in fact, I think they needed to be one-sided. I thought about this novel being, um, sort of call and response where Ben might respond and he actually sends them or other people. But I really wanted to lean into the pain of heartbreak. And I worried, Brett, because I thought this could really go off the rails, if there's only so
mm.
much of this that someone can take. But with most of my narrators, I think, and maybe this is me being self-conscious, they're a little annoying, and they are kind of they're know-it-alls and they're trying so hard to be perfect. Um, but if I had kind of pulled back on that even just a little, I think it would have been easy to just be annoyed.
Mm,
Whereas if you keep going, which is to say, if you're consistently neurotic and you're consistently kind of questioning the world and yourself, I think then humor creeps in. That anxiety allows for the narrator to be funny. And if he wasn't funny, I would have lost my reader, I think. If it had just been pain, I think I could have kept you for a third of the book, but maybe not the entire book.
What's interesting is when I was reading it there was almost like it's kind of like that book Ducks Newburyport, where there's a stream of consciousness that starts to happen because you're dropped in. I also want to ask you, because this is on a side note, this is so interesting that you have him unnamed this narrator, and why the decision to do that. But I do feel like I wrote at one point, it's almost like, not short stories necessarily, but it was almost like essays. This guy's view on this particular topic or this particular topic. And it's so true where that humor comes out, because he's somebody that seems so immersed in culture and current events, in politics, and so many different things. You're immediately dropped into his mind, just going off like flashbulbs.
Yeah. I, I'm drawn to digressions as a reader. I like following a path and then deviating for a bit to learn something. And I thought this to me mimics the style that I write in, mimics the style in which I have long conversations with good friends, which is
Mm,
to say, or even this interview, you know, we have a skeleton for how this is going to go. I'm sure you've thought of some things, I've thought of some things, but we're going to deviate, and those deviations are
sure.
sometimes the best bits. And I think they
Right.
keep people entertained, and also they bring in more people. And so, you know, there were times when I was writing and I was like, okay, great. We can connect on this universal feeling of grief and heartbreak. Sure. I think there are a lot of people out there. I know because I interviewed dozens while I was writing this book about heartbreak, and I was sort of saddened and surprised to find out everyone has this experience. Very few people didn't. I think only two people that I interviewed couldn't relate. Everyone else, whether they had been heartbroken 25 years ago and have been happily married ever since, or whether they were heartbroken last year or last week, the pain is still kind of there. They can draw it up very easily. I was talking to someone at a party once and they started to cry, and they've been happily married for a long time and they don't miss the person. They don't, none of it. But it was just like, that was such a horrible experience. It was so painful and they remember it so vividly. And so I thought we're all going to connect in these ways, but that's only going to take us so far. Let's talk a little bit about housing. Let's talk about, you know, the sanitation department and the Oscars and all this other stuff, which I think is also just, it's both interesting and humorous and really, I think, mimics the way an anxious mind works.
Yeah. So back to why the decision to leave him unnamed.
Ah, frankly, it started because I thought, practically speaking, someone in that position wouldn't name themselves in a letter.
Mm,
They would say, love me,
sure,
love.
sure. Yeah.
And so I thought if I started saying, you know, love Eduardo or love Andres or love, you know, Alejandro, like it wouldn't ring true to what that letter would be like. At some point I was like, well, the handful of times where I would put a name in, where I felt like I was going out of my way to avoid a name. For example, when you write a letter to the New York Times or to the Department of
Mm,
Sanitation, it really just felt like an unnecessary reveal, you
mm.
know, almost like it would get more attention than it needed. So it at that point it just was a commitment to how do I keep him unnamed because the few examples didn't weren't worth the reveal.
It's a fascinating thing because it's effective, but it also, it creates, for me, I should say specifically for my reading and interpretation of it, a certain opaqueness to it. And that I not only mean not in terms of the depth or the specificity of the character, but sometimes when you read something and you see a very clear image in your mind based on a name or some sort of identity marker, but
Hmm.
to have that removed is a fascinating, and I didn't even really notice it at first. But as I kept going, I thought, okay, we have all these other people in the same way that, and I love that you did this. You know, this is the he has a husband and they have two children, if I'm not mistaken.
Hmm.
One of which is non-binary.
Hmm.
But the brilliance of my overreaching and overworking mind immediately wants to catalog that non-binary character and find out what the quote unquote given sex is, right? Where on the binary this person is. And the fact that this person has a name, this child has a name that can be on either side of it.
Mhm.
totally fucked with me. But I also appreciated it because it did to me the exact thing I imagined you set out to do, which is to say it's non-binary. It shouldn't be necessary or important to have to know that information. I just, for me, I wanted
Yeah.
to know.
Yeah. No, I thought about that too. And also I want to address that, but I also another reason why I kept the narrator nameless is because after I finished the first draft of the book, I really felt like I had something that people could relate to.
Mm,
The poly part, the queer part, that was going to keep a lot of those were the barriers I thought. But the grief part and the heartbreak part, I thought this is universal. So if people start to identify with what they're reading, with the emotions, maybe every time they see love me or respectfully me or something, they also will start to maybe put themselves in the place of the narrator. And so I thought if I put a name, it would pull them out. And wanted to I wanted to leave that possibility there. Now, as for Jules, the non-binary child, it's true. I had to work hard there a little bit too. But I bring in the mother, the grandmother, who
right.
has trouble with the pronouns and does, if you're paying attention, reveals maybe what people are looking for because uses
Yes.
pronouns.
Yes.
I have a pet peeve in writing when I read other people's work because it feels outdated. I never give, uh, I almost never give race or gender upfront
Mm,
because I think um, I don't want people to draw on their own stereotypes
right.
and biases. So I think I will always reveal because I don't live in a raceless and genderless world, and I'm not trying to create one yet. Well, not yet anyway. But um, but I don't want it to be number one. And so when I'm reading a character and they say, you know, the Indian woman with her long hair and her this and her that, I'm like, oh God, that's lazy because you just let us, it's like you didn't do the work. You said, what is it you think black and Indian mean? And now you do the work and then I'll do this. Whereas I want to give you an idea of who this person is. And then after like a little bit later, race and gender and class and all these things will come up. They're going to be part of the character. You'll see them, but I don't want it to be the first thing I learn about a character because I'm human and I have been affected by the stereotypes and the biases in this world. And I'd much rather be challenged and be surprised and be like, oh, wow, I was thinking that was this person. I can't
Yeah.
believe. And I think that's much more interesting to me. So I almost never say race upfront.
And I love
Always come.
that. The first time that ever happened to me, it's so funny. I've had a lot of these conversations with writers. One of the writers that comes up a lot is Stephen King,
Mm,
because many people grew up on a Stephen King novel or discovered him, but the first time that ever happened to me was reading Stephen King's It, and he had this character of Mike, who you plotted through that massive book, and it wasn't until probably page 500 that it's revealed that Mike is black. And it was done in the most subtle way. I think it was because of a reaction that somebody had to him or an incident of racism. But I remember going through that and stopping and being like, "Wait a minute, what just happened?" And rereading it and thinking, "Wow, that was so powerful and so clever and so I don't know. It's just an
yes.
interesting thing."
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Ah,
Uh, um, okay, so where did the polyamory of this all come for you? Where did this idea, or where did the genesis for that come up? And
so I believe polyamory in some way, shape, or form has always existed, right? But as a queer person in Brooklyn in 2022 or 23, 24, when I was writing the book, polyamory is like there everywhere. It's part of the
oh,
zeitgeist,
interesting.
and it's having a moment. And so I was fascinated by it, and I have been fascinated by the concept of it. I wanted to write about heartbreak first and foremost, and I thought this could be a story about a straight dude who gets dumped by his wife and he's heartbroken. And people would empathize with that. You know, if it's written well, people are going to empathize with that. But I think I wanted to push further than that. First off, that wouldn't be my experience, and I wouldn't, not that I need to write my experience, but I think there's still stuff that I know and feel that I'd like to mine before I
Mm,
branch out and start writing other people's experiences and worldviews. And so I thought, what if this were more complicated?
mm,
What if to empathize with this person, you first had to shed some of your own biases and conservative views? And yeah, that's really what it comes down to in a nutshell. Like, can we still empathize with someone um, and have a shared experience if we don't agree with the circumstances in which that experience is happening? And, um, and so the more I wrote, the more I was like, oh, I wonder if I'll lose because it's not just queerness. It's like this. How do you feel sorry for someone who has it all? You
sure,
know?
sure. Yeah, and that comes up at moments. You're like, stop it. Stop being so. The reactions that many people have to him, whether it's his sister or his friend or something like that, is genuine and feels real. But I think what the success of the book does is exactly what you set out to do, which is makes you examine these things. And I sat there with a lot of this and thought, how would I deal in a similar situation to this? In a similar situation with a husband who models very much what you've written in terms of someone who's incredibly understanding, somebody who's probably a little more not, anxiety prone, or for lack of a better word, emotional.
Hmm.
And it's a really interesting thing. It's a really interesting thing to think about. And the decision that you made to take somebody who's anxious and put them in this situation, which is only going to make them spin out more.
Yeah.
Which is like obviously where a lot of the comedy comes from, but also there's that moment of wanting to slap them and say snap out of it. It's fascinating.
I mean, anxiety when you're feeling it isn't particularly fun,
Mm.
but when you think about it and when you write it, it's very funny. It's very funny to see someone trying. It's the sort of emotional equivalent of a Marx Brothers film. You know, you're just watching someone just trying to get out or handle a situation and but spinning plates and whirling dervishes, all of it, the anxiety of it, and putting yourself in life situations. I mean, I'm guessing that way I'm borrowing from my life because like I told you earlier, I have tremendous stage fright, but I said, you know what? I'm going to be an actor. And I went to college and I put myself in these situations that were horrific. I mean, Brett, when I tell you how painful it was to go to class every single Tuesday and Thursday for 2.5 hours, I would have to get to the building an hour earlier and run around the building like 30 minutes and get to class sweaty just so that I could just to like have the I don't know, this to relax a little or to tire out the anxiety, but it didn't work. And so, but I continue to put myself in situations that I'm afraid to fly and I'm afraid to public speak. And this career has been 50% writing and 50% flying and public speaking. But I do it because, I'm like, I still want to live a fun life. I still want to enjoy myself. I still want to have experiences. And so this anxious person, you're right. Why would he do this to himself? But I don't know. This is probably a good time to tell you that if you didn't already gather from the book, I was a big fan of George Michael. I continue to be a
No,
fan
no.
of George
And by the way, this is one of my things for you. Like, there's an incident with George Michael in the book, which we won't go into, but did this happen?
It did not.
Oh my God. I so wanted it to be your story. The whole time
I
I was
know.
like, I cannot wait to ask him about
I
this.
know. I know. Oh,
Um,
I know. I love that, that. Yeah. I love George Michael. I think he's wonderful. and he sat for an interview, I don't know when, and he was being asked about gay culture, and he was being a bit, I don't know, high and mighty, but also, I think, rightfully critical at the time. And he was saying, we become about circuit parties and white t-shirts and drinks, and we've lost our, sort of cultural acuity, and we're not curious anymore. And she said, well, why do you think, which is a bit of a stereotype, the interviewer said, why do you think gay people are so artistic? Like, where does that come from? And he said, well, okay, one of the basic principles of life is boy meets girl and they get married, and that's normal and healthy, and everything else flows from that. Society and civilization flow from this. We cannot question this. Now, next. And as a gay person, you have to question this. And when you question this very basic thing in order to function in life, you don't just stop questioning. Then suddenly you're like,
Right.
well, what else is broken? What else doesn't make sense? What else is keeping us from being our true selves? And that's art.
Mm.
That's art for me. It's curiosity and questioning and constantly being like, what's next and what's next? And polyamory, as impractical as it feels in this current society, I am curious all the time about like what what structures in society are really just ways to keep us in line, you know, and run counter to our instincts,
Sure.
um, to be ourselves. So that was part of where this all came from. Again, another preoccupation and or an anxiety, an existential one.
But it even speaks to you to what you just said, even to have like there's a quote that you say that he says in the book where it says there's something worthwhile in unorthodox relationships and atypical family structures. Maybe the world should adapt to us and not us to them. And that really resonated with me also because, you have this non-binary character, which this is such the zeitgeist. I mean, what everything we're watching now and the kind of the fight against this whole gender and sexuality in ways that we've never seen before. Although I think with transgender people, it's the same argument that was used for gay people in the 70s and the 80s. And, just repeating the same playbook, but with just different players.
Hmm.
But it is a fascinating thing. And it's a fascinating how you talk about the family structure. It's funny because my son, I have two kids. I have a son and a daughter, and my son is gay. And that was always an interesting thing, is having a gay child and recognizing that, being raised by two dads, and the thought process of what is the perception going to be? What are people going to think? How are people going to take that and look at that and think, what have we done?
This is this is why we're good drag queens. The witty ones anyway, because
Yeah.
you have to. It's like you're filing away. You're training this brain to just be ready to clap back at everything.
Yeah.
As a parent of gay children, as this is just one of 1,000 examples, or as a parent, period, as a gay parent. Oh, great, my kid's gay. Everyone's gonna say we made them gay. Oh,
Right.
we're living up to the stereotype. And then I'm like, no, because I was raised by straight people, so I have an answer for that. And I have an answer for this, and I have an answer for that. And you're always 10 steps ahead because you know or you feel that everyone is against you. And throw kids into the mix, and it's just even more complicated. So yeah, it's a disproportionate burden, I would say, psychologically, because you have a million things to worry about as it is. No one should have to also be worried about that too.
Sure. And kind of line with that, which what you were just saying, your narrator says, talking about the demise of the relationship, he said, look, I only contemplated our demise because I'm a hopeful pessimist. It's in my nature to plan for the worst, but that doesn't mean I want the worst to happen. It's my way of blunting the pain of surprise, a life tactic I consider normal in addition to practical. I love this term, hopeful pessimist. And I would gladly say this is a club that I would join. But do you think that you're a hopeful pessimist?
I am. I
Yeah.
am. I identify with that. I'm forever surprised when we elect people that we shouldn't, even though I know it's going that way, even though I don't. Yeah, it's interesting. From a very early age, and I don't know if I got this from my mother, I it's like I want the best for everyone. Collectively, I want the best for everyone, but I don't like anyone. Like I do actually, like I like you, Brett. I think we're having great interaction. But generally speaking, I find myself walking around being like, oh, why did that person do that? And why are they doing this? And why didn't they pick up after their dog? And why, why? But I want universal health care and I want
Right.
reparations for slavery and I want us to give the land back. Like I want all of those things to make us collectively better humans. And so that to me is optimism. That to me is hope. And
Yes.
I believe it can happen. But it's like, is it going to happen in my lifetime? Damn it. Probably not.
Yeah, no,
This, yeah,
I feel like we're
yeah.
in the Empire Strikes Back sequence of life right now,
Mhm.
where the bad guys are winning, and it's hard to feel optimistic. I have this conversation all the time. And again, this goes back to children, because putting a brave face forward and not saying, you know, I don't know what's going to happen and what I want for them. And my kids are older now. Like my son's 21 and my daughter's 18. They're both in college. But still, when you're having a 24-hour news feed sent to your pocket, it's hard. It's hard. All of it's hard. I want to read one more quote because I love this so much, and it's about kids, and this particularly resonated for me. This in the book, this takes place after an incident with his child Nico having something happen to him at school, and the concern of is the kid okay? And he says, I felt in that space of swirling chaotic humanity and just adequate engineering that my kid was better than me. In a way, he presented the possibility of a future more improved than my past, a version of this world in which we might feel freely without fear of stigma or repercussions of any kind. An emotional awakening was taking place everywhere all at once. Perhaps we were living through a revolution. That to me is hopeful. That to me fights that pessimism. I love that so much.
Thank you, Brett. Thanks
It,
for that. Yeah, I feel that what I wrote there. I do feel that. That's where the optimism is. I do feel that it's happening in little places here and there, and I'm always surprised when things are really bad, and then I see a video or I hear someone say something or read an article somewhere I was not expecting.
mhm,
Someone is
mhm.
thinking so positively, fighting, fighting.
Yeah, 100%.
I will tell you something because you seem to have connected with the book, and I really appreciate that, by the way. Very much. So thank you for taking the time to do this and to be so thoughtful in your questions and conversation. When I left my previous publisher, the first two books were with another publisher, and when I was shopping this book around, a few of the editors who I interviewed with said, this is your breakout book. You've had critical success with the first two, but this is your mainstream breakup. Now, some of that I thought is they're trying to get me to go with their publisher, so they're going to say nice things. It's like
Sure.
Russian fraternities or something. And then, um, and then when I finally went with Viking and Ibrahim Ahmed, who is just the best. I love this guy. He's such a wonderful editor and such a good person. And he said, yes. And I kept saying, Ibrahim, I don't understand. I get that heartbreak is universal, but this is about a gay guy in a polyamorous situation with a non-binary kid in Brooklyn, New York. This doesn't scream mainstream to me at all. And then I remember going to Winter Institute to meet a bunch of the American Booksellers Association, and the people who came up to me to tell me that they loved the book and they connected with. I mean, it was across the board. It was not gay people. It was not
Mm.
even people of color. I mean, it was a mix. It was everyone. And so I am hopeful that um, that this, not that it's a mainstream book. I didn't mean that. I just mean that it makes me happy to think that it has a broad reach and that it can connect with lots of people. And so it means a lot to hear the things that connected with you. Uh, you hope, but you don't know. And so it is nice. Thank you very much.
No, of course. I think it always must be such a strange. I said this to a lot of writers. I think it must be. It's such a interesting, strange, unique experience to kind of create this world and live in your head and put it on paper and get your thoughts out. it's two different things, right? The creation of the book is one thing. The book going out into the world is its own other thing, because it's
Mhm.
suddenly not just yours anymore, and
Yeah,
it's a shared experience in whatever way it touches people. So that's so
yeah,
interesting, and the individuality of that too.
yeah.
Um,
And I
and
and I almost never think of my work um, individually because, listen, if I had all the time in the world and no interruptions, I think I have five, six more book ideas ready to go that I want to sit down and write on. But life gets in the way, so it's going to be years before I can get all of those done. Uh, and then I think it's the collective 8 or 10 books that are going to tell a bigger story. So I'm always really
interesting.
happy when people enjoy the chapters, but I think it's the evolution of these characters that are going to tell kind of a more complete version of the American experience, which is what I'm excited about. That means I'll be old before people really see me, Brett.
But that's all of our problems.
Yeah.
I think that all the time as you struggle to like stay like all of it. That is, I could say, the one of the positives about having children is they constantly try to keep you relevant while also bringing you down to size. So yeah, it's a constant struggle. Well, Alejandro, this was so wonderful. You're awesome. Please, everyone, buy the book. Buy independent if you're able to, but just get the book. It's really lovely. It's funny. It's moving. It's so damn smart. Congratulations.
Thanks, Brett. And if you're in the market for one of your casting projects for a nervous queer Latino with an East Coast-ish accent, keep in mind.
You never know. You could end up on Shrinking. Who knows?